Good morning. This is the Sativa Segment, episode 28. Looking forward to this wonderful episode because I have my friend Daniel Rutter on the show. Before we get started, I'd like to say that this episode is fueled by Ritter Spencer Cheng. It's a business boutique law firm focusing on healthcare and alternative substances that's based here in Addison, Texas. If you want to know a little bit more about it, go to ritterspencercheng.com. Daniel, I haven't seen you in a while.
I know, it's great to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's been too long. What have you been up to?
Writing insurance.
Yeah. So, when did we meet each other? It's been several years.
Probably 9 years ago at the Frisco Chamber of Commerce.
Wow, those were the days.
A few law firms before, and a few lifetimes. It seems like.
I know.
And
since then, your insurance practice has changed quite a bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Business has grown.
Yeah,
and focus has got more locked in on a few industries, and excited to talk about this with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get started, you remind me, how did you get into insurance? I mean, did you just come out of college and say, "Hey, I want to do insurance"?
No, actually, as most good insurance producers do, they fall backwards into it. So
okay.
I actually had a career in marketing and advertising previous to insurance. And then honestly, I found a LinkedIn post that sounded really interesting.
Okay.
And then I met the team at Hub and started to learn more about commercial insurance. So I only do commercial insurance. I tell people I don't insure your home or your Honda, but commercial insurance is really fascinating, and it's a critical piece of business. And so as I got into that, I just really kind of fell in love with it. Just
out of curiosity, is that like a longer turnaround time for commercial insurance versus, like, say, individual? I would think
it's a much different sales process, if you will.
Probably bigger policies.
Definitely bigger policies. You're talking about, large property schedules, high revenue values. So yeah, it's definitely different.
Okay. So you've been with Hub for about almost a decade, doing commercial insurance. Now let's talk about cannabis.
Sure.
You're on the cannabis team there at Hub.
Yeah, I'm part of the cannabis specialty practice.
Okay. That had to have been an interesting conversation within Hub several years ago when it decided to say, "Hey, we're going to cover cannabis businesses," because it's a controversial industry and it's not the easiest industries to navigate through. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so going back about 8 years, Hub as a company looked across all of our offices and said, we have a lot of specialty producers and specialty industry focus, and we should start leveraging that. So we actually stood up 8 different specialty practices. So things like construction, real estate, entertainment, and one of them was agriculture. And so I initially joined the agriculture specialty practice because my mom's side of the family are large industrial scale farmers in Arkansas. And so I was like, I kind of grew up around this. This will be interesting. No one was doing it here in Dallas, Texas. So I joined the practice through agriculture. And then about 2 years into that, agriculture said, "Hey, a lot of our clients are actually cannabis clients." And so there was enough push there that they made kind of a sub practice out of agriculture for cannabis specifically. And that's kind of the origin of it.
Okay. So now I'm curious about that conversation with ag. I mean, okay, so you're covering farmers and different types of crops. And then one day, and to be clear, Hub is a broker. It's not a carrier.
Yep.
As a brokerage company, Hub, you guys work with different types of carriers.
Absolutely.
Okay. And by the way, those of you who are listening, you're going to really want to listen to some of the stuff that Daniel has to say, because for those of you who are operating cannabis businesses, he's going to give you some tips about policies, and then obviously what some of the claims look like, right?
Sure.
But going back to the ag, you have an ad group, and then they get a cannabis client, and then they get two, and then four, and you know how that goes. Is that what happened, or is
Yeah,
it?
I mean, we were involved in the industry from the jump. So as soon as legal products were being sold,
Uh-huh.
businesses needed insurance, and we kind of stepped into that. Um, so if you back up with Hub corporate history, we originated out of a group of brokers out of Canada, and I think that contributes to us. Canada has a little different mindset about this
Of
product
course,
than
it
the
had to be
U.S.
Canada.
And then, once the corporation, was really formed, headquarters moved to Chicago. So we're based here in the U.S. Headquarters here in the U.S. now. But I think that kind of the founders' openness and some of the
Okay.
the outlook that they brought to this really continues to resonate in the organization now. And so, in addition to that, we have a strong presence in the Northwest. And you think Oregon, Washington, some of the states that really kind of pioneered the industry behind Colorado.
Mhm.
That's where some of that stems as well. So we've strong Canadian presence, really large presence in the Northwest, have a really strong presence in Colorado. And so we were already in the markets that this was happening. And so
Mhm.
then it was just a matter of, well, what else makes us different? And I
Right.
think, for Hub, one of the key differentiators is we're the fifth largest in the world, but we're the largest privately held. So we didn't have the Wall Street pressure dictating to us, hey, this is a federally illegal product. We had a little bit more flexibility internally, I think. And so that gave us the opportunity to really say, we're going to stand behind this, and we're going to be
Right.
the leader in it. And so, fast forward to now, we're placing over $175 million in premium for over 950 clients.
That's just in cannabis.
Just in cannabis.
Wow. Because I do see you guys investing a lot of resources and
Yeah.
time into this industry. As an example, you and I ran into each other at the MJ Biz conference several years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 years ago, maybe. And you guys had a big soiree, and it was at Paris. And I think you guys had it this year in conjunction with First Citizen Bank, because I was
Yep.
there again. And for as a reminder, that's the largest cannabis conference in the world.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah, so we do a summit every year for the specialty practice.
Okay.
And that's an opportunity for, throughout the practice, we have over 350 members of Hub. So, corporate wide, we're over 16,000 employees. About 350 of those participate in the cannabis specialty practice, and kind of give you an idea of the scale.
Mhm.
And that goes from everything from people like me, as a producer, to our claims team, our risk services team. There are professionals across the board. But yeah, having that kind of a presence, I don't know of any other broker that has the depth and the size that we have in the space.
Well, I mean, I know you guys are definitely one of the big players, if not the biggest one. I'm sure being private gives you a lot. Your company becomes a little bit more agile, a little
Sure.
more nimble, right? As you said, a little bit less restrictions, less pressure, in some ways. But let's talk about some of the businesses that you work with, or at least Hub works with.
Yeah.
Everything from building owners to manufacturing companies to retailers and so forth. What types of policies are applicable in each, I guess, segment within the supply chain?
Yeah, I think a cannabis business is just a business.
Yep.
So they have all of the same concerns. They have general liability. They have property.
Mhm.
A lot of them will have autos,
Mhm.
especially if you're on the manufacturing and the distribution side. Getting that product moved around is a real concern. You're going to have maybe unique coverages on the management side. The need to have directors and officers is maybe different. It's like any consumable product. A product recall product can be a really key component to your risk management strategy. And then Where it differs is you get into the, for instance, on the property side, actually covering different aspects of your product through different, portions. What is it at a seed or is it finished product ready for distribution? So all of those kinds of things are where the difference lies, but ultimately you're going to have the same concerns from a business insurance standpoint as any other business.
Yeah, do you find the premiums to be a little bit higher on average for a similar type of a coverage?
Yeah. Okay. And we're seeing some improvement in that. You have to keep in mind it wasn't too long ago that there was no industry. And right. So with insurance specifically, it's based off of, actuarial data. What can we look to say, what's the probability of this claim? What do historical payouts look like? And how do we rate for that? So when you have none of that, and at the end of the day, you're required to make enough money to keep everyone solvent, you charge a high rate. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of the origin. That's where things have been. But as the market and the industry matures, we're going to see that continue to evolve and get back to something that looks hopefully more like a standard business. And that's starting to happen. Maybe not as fast as owners want it to happen. Yeah. But we are seeing some updates in the market that are positive.
Do you see in the cannabis industry? Do you see less renewals statistically? And I only ask that because you have, your large MSOs, right? Your multi-state operators, which are multi-million-dollar businesses, and then you have your mom and pop shops that it's just getting started, and the failure rate sometimes can be, pretty substantial. Yeah, depending on which state you're in, depending on what you're doing, right? And obviously, if a business fails, they're not going to renew. Right. And, or if they get consolidated, they may not renew, but whatever company they can consolidate with, that's one less policy that you're covering. Do you see that number being a little bit different than average, or is it about the same?
Yeah, no, there's a high fail rate. There's currently a lot of consolidation going on, a lot of M&A stuff happening. Sure. I think at the end of the day, all that stuff's going to be driven by state and market pressure. Okay. And that's one of the challenges with this industry, is just how fragmented the business is from one state to the next.
Of course, yeah.
And so you get these business climates that may compress. And so because of that, yes, you're going to see, like I said, maybe a higher fail rate. And then you're going to see a lot of consolidation. I think that's been going on, and I think it's going to ramp up, in the next couple of years as well.
Yeah. I think we talked about this briefly, but what will be the number one question you get? How much does my premium cost?
Yeah.
The cost.
Yeah. What's it cost?
Yeah. So pretend I'm
followed by how do I get it cheaper?
Yeah. I mean, pretend, let's do a little role playing here. I'm a potential customer. I own a business. You're trying to sell me. What are some considerations that you take under consideration when you're trying to sell me a policy?
Yeah. So, first of all, I don't consider myself a salesperson at all. So as a broker, you're hiring me and Hub to be your representative in the marketplace.
Got it.
So I'm going to take your business risk and I'm going to try to sell that to the insurance carrier. Because basically they're saying, for this amount of money, I'll assume all of your liability. Yeah. Or most of your liability. And so, when you're talking about placing coverage, the things that are going to be most impactful, I think that's maybe a better question, is what makes a good risk versus a bad risk. Mm-hmm. Is how much are you aware of the compliance that's required in your state, and right. What are you doing around that? What kind of risk management strategy do you have in terms of securing your product and avoiding losses? And I think that's going to be where you're going to find a lot of difference from one rating to the next. Because the companies that have a real good grip on that and are doing an excellent job of mitigating risk, then they're going to see better rates, or they're going to find coverage where others aren't. So if you're not managing the business, to the extent that the carriers want, then you may be one of these companies that says, well, there's no insurance out there. And so sometimes it's not a market issue as much as it is a strategy issue.
Okay. And do you sit down with your clients to develop the strategy?
I'm very fortunate because at Hub we have, we have such a breadth of expertise from compliance professionals. We have another team that is on the risk mitigation side, so they can come and do site reviews and advise on best practices for security. We've got business continuity expertise, so if we need to help you on that, so pretty much any part of the business that an operator is looking at and going, hey, why can't I find this coverage? Or, why is this so expensive? We can come in and consult and say, here are some ways that we could improve your position in the market.
Is that a cost feature for the insured? Like if you brought in a team to do a site inspection to consult with them on this is what you need to implement X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Is that a cost feature for them?
I'm going to give you the insurance answer of it depends.
Okay.
By and large, no. That's one of the things that Hub has really stood out in the market with is we have these services and these expertise as just part of our broker service. There are times where the involvement may be pretty extensive, and we may do a fee deal on some of those. But especially for our middle market and our higher clientele in terms of size and scope, we're going to do these things as just part of being the broker on the account.
Now, do you identify exclusions up front? And what I mean by exclusions is items that's part of the operations that's not covered under your policy, right? Every policy has that. Right.
Yeah.
And in order to get those exclusions removed or to cover the items that are not covered because they are exclusions, many times the insured have to buy like an add-on feature as part of the policy. Am I correct?
Potentially. A lot of exclusions are there because the exclusion is intended to be covered elsewhere.
Okay.
So, just as a quick, for instance, your GL policy will exclude the recall of the product from the marketplace, but that's because there's a product recall policy available. So, a lot of exclusions are not there to say that you can't cover it, but that this is not the appropriate place to cover it.
Okay.
And so, but reviewing exclusions is critical. I mean, if you don't know what you don't have in insurance, that's where you're going to get set up for failure. Because the worst time to find out that it's excluded is when you've got a claim.
So give me like a top 2 exclusion that like a cannabis business out there that's operating.
I think the product recall is number 1.
Okay, so you and I have talked about product recall a lot.
That's a big one.
Okay.
Because it's so costly and there are so many ways that it could come about. So product recall is a big one.
What do you see as the number 1 product recall item? Because there are gummies out there, there's tinctures, there's beverages.
It's going to depend on the product. But, the short version is anything that does or could potentially make the product unsafe.
Okay.
So is that, hardware of a vape? Is it, the content of the gummy? All of these things could potentially start a product recall claim.
What do you think is like the most costly product recall item that the insurer or the carrier has to pay out on because some adverse event happened? Is it someone who took a gummy and they had carcinogens in there or had like some bad stuff in there and now they have an adverse effect in the hospital and now the insurance company has to pay for that? Or what are some like high cost items as part of a product recall if the claim was filed?
Any kind of as they say, unknown allergen.
Okay.
So mold.
Yeah.
Things like that. We talked about this a little bit before we get on camera, but just the nature of a flower specifically is there's a moisture content, and so packaging organic material with a certain amount of moisture content in a plastic bag creates its own challenges, and but again the number of ways that product recall can be brought in are pretty numerous. And I think it's sometimes challenging to think of all the various ways that the product could end up being deemed as unfit for the market and then having to be pulled off.
Right. Now, you cover hub in your work. You cover outside of Texas, and because I know you do quite a bit of work in Oklahoma, right?
So Oklahoma is of interest to me because it is the closest state to Texas that really has a broad medical cannabis practice, and it's one that I've been watching because it's been very interesting.
It's also a very saturated market.
Well, that's where I'm going with the interesting comment. Is it's
are the moratoriums still going on?
I don't want to use this term, but yes, there is a moratorium going on. I read an article as I was preparing for this discussion that coined it as the Wild West of cannabis, and I think it kind of has that mantra. And there's reasons for that, right? But again, it goes back to every state has their own political flavor of how they're addressing the industry, and Oklahoma has a different take on it.
My understanding is it still has more licensees in the state of Oklahoma than every other state in the country.
I don't know every state. I did bring
because they were really kind of giving out licenses left and right in Oklahoma for a period of time before the moratorium implemented. I mean, the joke was if you had a heartbeat, a cell phone, and internet coverage, you can probably apply for a license in Oklahoma and get it.
So, without commenting on that, let me just run through some numbers.
Okay.
So, the medical marijuana passed in 2018.
Yep.
In 2021, there were 9,400 growers.
Yep. So I helped several of them get the licenses.
Just to put this in perspective, Oklahoma's population is around 4 million. So that's one grow for every 435 residents. And we have to believe that there are some children, some elderly people, and probably some adults that you don't use cannabis in that state. So that 1 per 435 gets to be a very silly number. And that's just the growers. We're not talking about the other 3 different type of licenses, the manufacturing license, the retail license, the transportation license that's in there. So in August of 22, they did put the moratorium on. I think that's extended through 26.
Okay.
As of December 2024, there were 3,000 growers supplying to 1,800 dispensaries. So I also looked at that dispensary number as a very interesting thing. So there are... Just back up for a little bit.
Sure. You said back in 2018, or what was the year? I think it was 2021. There were 9,000 growers, and now there's only 3,000.
Yeah.
So the attrition rate is very, very high.
It has really been high, and I think the moratorium is hoping to continue to curtail that. Still 3,000 growers for 4,000 or for 4 million residents of the state. That seems like a pretty high number. But the 1,800 dispensaries was really interesting to me because there are only 77 counties in Oklahoma. So you're looking at 23 dispensaries per county on average.
That's a lot. Yeah. I actually just had lunch with a group of people yesterday, and a person from an accounting firm actually mentioned that he drove across the border, and within a 5-mile radius, he saw anywhere between 5 to 10 different dispensaries. Yeah,
I loved a vacation in the Broken Bow area, and Broken Bow had 3 that I saw right off of right going into town. And I'm like, I think the population of Broken Bow, Oklahoma is like 350 full-time residents. So, and obviously it's a huge tourist town, right? There's a lot of people going in there. But again, when you just look at the numbers, it's odd. Yeah. Right. It's different than in a lot of these other states. And so, not insurance related, but I think that speaks to the difference in, local and state laws and how every state is completely different. There is no true homogeny, if you will, of rules and regulations.
So what are the claim filings like in a state with that many businesses and licensed owners?
The claim filing is going to look similar to everywhere else in terms of, losses. I think the bigger question there is how many of those aren't actually insured, because, you could work with a broker that isn't aware of all of the cannabis exclusions, and they could place a policy, and neither of you have any idea that you don't actually have coverage. So,
or you don't have adequate coverage.
Yeah. But if you have a property policy that has a cannabis exclusion, and
that's true.
You've got something operating out of there, you may not have any business income coverage at all. You certainly won't have any product coverage. So there's a lot of things that can happen, and that doesn't preclude business necessarily from getting insurance, right? It's a matter of, does that policy provide you the coverage that you believe you're buying?
Right. I guess you make a good point in that if you're a business owner or if you're an operator, you bought a policy from a broker, you think you have adequate coverage or you have coverage. But in reality, when it's time to actually file a claim, something catastrophic happens and you're not covered, that I would imagine that would have detrimental effects.
Yeah.
So, but I would also think that whatever broker they're working with, and this is just my own ignorance, maybe in the insurance world, they would go through and walk them through the exclusions similarly to what you and your team does.
Again, you would expect that,
right? But you've seen probably a myriad of different types of brokers, people who that work in the insurance world. Some are more knowledgeable than others, and some people.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it just comes down to familiarity with the industry.
Yeah,
and really having a grip on, what's going to be covered, and if it's not covered here, where do we go to get it? Because again, by and large, especially at this point, sitting here in 2025. Cannabis operators of all types have options.
Yeah,
I think that's the positive thing here. The thing to keep in mind is that you've got to know how to find those options correctly, and that's where you get instances where things aren't covered.
Yeah. Let's make a little shift.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the Texas market. What do you think about the proposed ban bills and how it's going to impact the Texas THC landscape, if you will? Because as we both know, there's not an adult use program here. The medical program is mediocre at best on a good day. Yeah. And no offense, Greg Abbott, no offense, Dan Patrick, but it is. No offense, DPS. But it is somewhat limited. What we here in Texas primarily rely on is the hemp cannabinoid space that's producing either the non-intoxicating space, which is your CBD products, CBG, CBN, or alternatively the intoxicating market with Delta 8, Delta 9 THC products. What are your thoughts about the proposed changes that's somewhat likely to occur here in Texas here in 2025?
Yeah, I'm very nervous about it.
Okay.
I don't think that this is moving in the right direction. I think it's going to create, from a political standpoint, it's going to create a lot of challenges. As far as CBD is concerned, my understanding is it's not going to impact hemp in the sense of hemp. It is going to impact hemp with when it's processed for the Delta products. And that could completely do away with a segment of business.
Yeah. We're talking about smokable hemp, gummies, beverages, everything, right?
Everything. Yeah.
I would imagine whether it's Hub or some other broker, it would impact your bottom line in terms of revenue, because if you have less businesses, you have less coverage, just less premiums as a whole.
Yeah. I know for me, I don't look at these situations and necessarily worry about, my book of business bottom line.
Yeah.
And I don't think Hub has that outlook either, because, where one business stops, there's opportunity somewhere else. Like, so long as business is happening, insurance is going to be a part of it. But I look at the businesses, that have made these investments, that have hired these employees, and that's where my concern is just what happens to that. I think it creates a very different environment, because now you're going to, that market is not small. There are enough adults in Texas that choose to use those products. And when you take them off the market, does that take away the desire to use a similar product? I don't think so. And so now we create another law enforcement issue. It just, I think it snowballs into something that is, not desired.
Yeah.
And, it's been interesting. You've seen Houston, you've seen Dallas, you've seen Austin, all pass these measures to decriminalize certain, amounts of possession. And how do those laws hold up? I think that the bigger picture is very complex. From an insurance standpoint, if the product becomes illegal, you won't be able to get insurance for it anymore. That just kind of stands to reason. You can't insure an illegal product. So there will be challenges there. But I think the bigger conversation is really around what the public wants and is this good for Texas?
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point. I also think that, we've had this hemp consumable program for some time now, a number of years. It's administered through DSHS. By taking this away for those who have become accustomed to this program, people are going to get stuff where they're going to get stuff, right? They're going to find a way to get stuff. And I think that creates some imbalances in the market, in that there could be more criminal activity potentially, versus a regulated market. There's a regulatory framework. And of course, being, as you said, if it's illegal, it'd be very, very difficult for you to cover it as a covered business or covered products. So
yeah, I mean, hemp's going to continue to be protected through the Farm Bill. So that part I'm not concerned about really. But I think there's a fair number of hemp producers that are using the product to ultimately produce that into these other versions, and that going away is not the right direction in my opinion.
Right. So I'll shift gears on you one more time. You and I talked briefly about this article we both read about climate change and how how the different types of I will call it acts of God or acts of nature,
Sure.
Right? And how that's impacting the cannabis industry, whether it's in the form of hurricanes or natural storms. Have you seen an uptick on that, or is it consistent with what you and I talked about in terms of because of these catastrophic events, and now there's more coverage or these claim issues by businesses in the industry?
I don't think that the climate change in particular is any more detrimental to cannabis than it is any other industry.
Okay.
And the claim scenario from that specific article, they're talking about perils that frankly are going to be covered so long as the insurance is written correctly. So is there a higher number of incidents? We'll let the climate scientists debate that, but from an insurance coverage standpoint, you get into some interesting things, especially around like outdoor grows. So an outdoor grow obviously can't fall in the traditional crop market, being federally illegal. So there have been new products that have come online in the last couple of years that are really interesting around that space, specifically parametric products. So a parametric product is going to allow a grower to ensure around specific parameters of events. Could it be wind speed? Could it be rainfall? Could it be temperature? So for instance,
yeah, I was going to say, how does that work? Because I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, so you put a definite parameter around it. So maybe it's temperature, and you say, hey, between this time of the year, so I need to harvest the crop, before the third week of October, and if it freezes before then, I'll suffer a loss.
Okay.
And so you can buy a parametric program that says, if the temperature falls below freezing during this time period, it pays X number of dollars.
Wow. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So you're putting essentially quantitative measures in terms of time and I guess
exposure.
in exposure, in your example, temperature to determine whether something is covered or not.
Yeah. And you can look and say, what could be most devastating to me? Is it temperature? Mm-hmm. Is it precipitation? Mm-hmm. If we got 4 inches of rain, if we got no rain, what could actually create a situation where I cannot see this crop through and I could potentially lose all the investment? So those are new programs. Things like that are ways that I guess you could say climate change, but really just weather concerns and the changing weather concerns can be insured against. And then those policies are very interesting. You talked about claims earlier. I think everyone gets a little nervous when you have a claim because, is it going to be covered?
Yeah.
So on a parametric policy, it's a very black and white, yes or no. Did the temperature drop below this during these dates? Mm-hmm. If yes, then it pays this. So the payouts are very quick. There's not this adjusting period. And so from a business standpoint, that could be very beneficial because instead of having to worry about, is it covered? How long will it take to settle the claim? The carriers will move very quickly to pay out on these parametric programs, which is a real benefit from a cash flow standpoint.
Yeah, that's a very cool product. I hadn't heard about that. Thank you. As we're wrapping up here,
Sure.
give me some best practices in terms of if you were a business, if you were to file a claim, what are some best practices? Is it making sure that all your documentation is in place? Is it making sure you provide the adequate notices early? What are some typical best practices for business owners when they have coverage? One, and really specifically if they have adequate coverage, to your point. But some catastrophic or adverse event happens. Walk me through the items that they should be concerned about.
Yeah, I think the short answer is document.
Okay.
So whether it's taking pictures, whether it's getting statements, depending on the type of loss, and then also, I would hope that you have a relationship with your broker such that you feel comfortable to call them right away. So I get those phone calls sometimes, or, hey, we've been dealing with this. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm like, why were you dealing with it? Mm-hmm. Instead of calling me and letting me know. Because as your broker, again, I'm your representative. So I should be able to have conversation with you and say, hey, here's what we need to be thinking about. These are documents that we should be collecting right now. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure that we're photographing these things. Let's talk to that person and get that statement. So, just being as proactive and not hoping that it goes away is so critical because time is definitely an element in these things. Preservation of property is also a concern. So if you have a situation where you have, for instance, a property loss, making sure that you're doing everything you can to preserve the property and get it protected while you wait for the claims adjuster to come and take a look themselves. All those things go a long way in terms of giving the carrier a lot of comfort that, hey, this accident is something that, that they're trying to get their hands around as well.
Right. So I think, for the insured, they have to remember that, you're not against them, right? You're their advocate. They've hired you to really kind of go to bat for them.
Yeah. And
as you're working with different carriers, and you had mentioned a number of carriers that you deal with. What are some of the carriers you deal with?
Probably the top three in cannabis is going to be, Safe Herb, Canisher, CanGen.
Okay.
You're not going to have Travelers or Liberty Mutual write your cultivating company.
Right.
It's just not going to be there. And I would say if you do have policies for them, probably want to look at some of those cannabis exclusions, get your forms page out and just see, what might actually be excluded in there. Because that's not who's in that space. Outside of that, there's some really good wholesale partners that we have that most brokers are going to have access to. So whether it's CRC or RT, there's several that have cannabis teams, which are fantastic resources. Especially if your broker doesn't have the internal resources, they can lean on these wholesale partners to to get some guidance and to get some expertise in the space.
Okay, so yeah, like I was saying, I mean, you're on their side. They shouldn't be hiding the ball from you. You're the person that really goes to the CanGens of the world to go to bat for them. So let me just get this correct. They should document. They should work with you early and be proactive.
Yeah,
and obviously be diligent about gathering the documentation and be prepared. It sounds like to when you're about to file a claim, have all those different items ready to go so that there's less supplementation and less chances of a claim denial. Am I correct? Okay. Okay. Well, as we're wrapping up here, give me one goal that you have in 2025 for this industry that you would like to see either change or that you would like to be a part of.
I like to be a part of anything that's tricky. Okay. So any expanding the book within any part of the business. I really like the cultivation and the manufacturing side. I think those two are super interesting to me. Anyone that's listening to this might have what they believe is a unique challenge. Maybe your broker's told you we can't do that.
Right.
Those are challenges that the Mia and the team at Hub really love to get a hold of. On our cannabis call yesterday, one of our producers was talking about finding some intellectual property coverage for a business. And, another broker had been searching the market and told them, this can't be done. And, his comment was, it took me 3 months to find this policy, but we got it done. And so those are the kinds of challenges. If it's tricky and complex and you're really wondering, how are we going to navigate this? That's the stuff that's exciting. That's where we really want to come in and be a resource.
Good. Well, it sounds like you can truly bring some value to a lot of businesses in the industry, and I applaud you for your efforts, Daniel. And but thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and we could talk for a long time. There's several other aspects of insurance that I'm specifically on the property and casualty side, but Hub as an organization, we've set up a lot of things around employee benefits coverage for cannabis companies. We've set up some real interesting things on 401k. So ultimately, I think Hub and the industry as a whole looks to continue to legitimize this industry And part of that is going to be employee engagement, retention, things like that. And we're leading the way on that as well. So any questions about that? Like I said, I'm not personally on that side of the house, but I work very closely with colleagues that are. And that may be a future episode for you. You can dive into the the people side of the business instead of the property and casualty side. But we're excited to be a part of it, and this is definitely, like I said, we've been in it from the beginning, and we plan to continue to lead the way for years to come.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Okay. Really enjoyed it.